Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Nilsson, and I am the Associate Dean of Graduate Education in the Faculty of Science. On behalf of the Dean and of the whole Faculty of Science, we would like to welcome you to the 12th edition of Sun and Science, which is part of our regular Soup and Science series. Today we have three incredible speakers who will be presenting to you today about their research. We have Professor Yann Polain de Waroux from Department of Geography and the Institute of International Development. We have Professor Shirin Enger from the Department of Oncology and the Medical Physics Unit, and Professor Jordan Axt from the Department of Psychology. Once the presentations are completed, you will each receive a message from the host to join a breakout room. And in this breakout room, you will be in smaller groups where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions to each presenter. Each of our presenters will rotate through the rooms every 10 minutes until they've been in all three rooms. We'll then come back to the main room for a wrap-up and final remarks. So we'll begin with Yann's presentation. Welcome, Yann.
Okay, thank you. Let me test this. Oh, okay. Resume slideshow. Let's see. Okay, I think this is working now. Hi, everyone. I'm Yann Polain. Nice to virtually meet you all today. And I'll start by saying that my title might seem a little strange, but it will become clearer towards the end of this presentation. So bear with me. Let's first start by thinking about forests. You've all seen forests. Most of us like forests. They're nice to have around. They're nice to hike in. They're beautiful and useful in a lot of different ways. Many of you probably also know that forests are being cut down in many places of the world to make room for agriculture. You've probably heard about deforestation either in the Amazon, which is pictured here, or in other places like Indonesia or the Congo Basin. Most of my work revolves around understanding these dynamics of deforestation, mostly in South America. And as a geographer, one of the things I really like to do is to look at how things change from above on satellite images. So let's take a look at a series of satellite images of the eastern part of Bolivia. Here, what you see, the deeper green areas are forests, and the clearer areas to the left are agriculture. And look what happens as we move ahead in time from 1984 here to 2000, 2010, and 2016. As you can see, there's a massive expansion of fields of agriculture over forests towards the east of the country, meaning that farmers over time are cutting trees to cultivate these areas further and further into the forests. When we see patterns like that, a geographer's job is to ask what's happening there. Why is agriculture expanding in that particular way, in these particular locations, and at that particular time? Who are those people chopping down trees, and why are they doing that? One thing that I'm particularly interested in is exploring how what might seem like a very local phenomenon in a distant country, Bolivian farmers are chopping down trees to produce food, something like that, is actually the expression of complex dynamics that reach far beyond the specific place and have their origins in multiple other countries. And I'm going to make that point briefly by looking at two types of farmers that are involved in driving agricultural expansion in those lowlands of Bolivia. So now we can go back to that title, Capital Has No Homeland. This is something that a Brazilian farmer told me once to explain why he and many others had moved across national borders to invest in Bolivia and Paraguay. Indeed, when you look at who is doing agriculture in the Bolivian East, you soon realize that it's not primarily Bolivians. In fact, there have been several waves of farmers from other countries that have come over the years to invest in agriculture in Bolivia. In the 1990s, Brazilian farmers had many problems at home, including a devaluation of their currency, rising land prices, not enough land to expand, so they started moving to other countries. Bolivia had cheap land and other advantages that made it very attractive. And so many Brazilians came there to farm and ended up farming almost a third of the area under soybeans in Bolivia. And soybeans are the main crop in the region, so quite a significant part of agriculture is driven by Brazilian farmers there. A similar movement happened in the 2000s with Argentine farmers to Bolivia. So here what you have is a transnational movement of farmers motivated by a search for profit in agriculture under changing conditions in different countries. So what happens in Bolivia is very much a function of what happens in other countries. But it isn't all about the search for profits. In Bolivia, another really important group of farmers is conservative Mennonites, a religious and ethnic group with its origins in Western Europe in the 15th century, and whose more conservative members have migrated many times to stay away from the rest of society and preserve their faith and their way of life. I should note that not all Mennonites are conservative, but those in Bolivia mostly are. The blob of deforested land in this circle that you see in the center of the slide here is a Mennonite colony, so a community of Mennonites created in 1975 by Mennonites who had left the country of Belize because they didn't like that their community, and I'm going to try to get that slide to move. Yeah, there we go. They didn't like that their community there in Belize was modernizing and adopting new technologies, which they saw as a threat to their way of life and to their faith. So those people moved to Bolivia, but that community in Belize had been created by people who had actually moved 20 years earlier from Mexico for similar reasons. And before that, from Canada in the 1920s, right here in this country. So other Mennonites actually came through different trajectories directly from Canada, from Mexico, from other countries like Paraguay or Argentina. All of these movements largely influenced by a desire to keep their way of life. So when you put all this together, you can see that the local issue like deforestation in Bolivia is deeply connected to multiple places far away and through different sets of motives, of motivations behind people's actions. A lot of my work is to try to disentangle these connections and understand what they mean for how landscapes change and how we can manage that change in order to go towards a more sustainable world. And that's it for my talk. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
We have a question. I think we have some time.
Okay, who's speaking?
It's in the chat. What excites you most about your research? To Yann? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Stephanie, I think. What excites me most about my research? Well, relating to what I've talked about, I think I'm very much fascinated by those distant connections and discovering as you look into it that things are much more complex than it appears, and also that places are connected in so many ways to other distant places. And I think that's one thing that I keep being surprised and fascinated by, discovering those connections. I was telling about those people moving from Canada to Mexico, to Belize, to Bolivia. There's many more such histories and stories and trajectories going on there, and I find those really interesting to discover. So yeah, that's one way to answer that question.
Great, thanks very much. So we will now move on to our next speaker, Professor Shirin Enger from Department of Oncology and from the Medical Physics Unit. Welcome, Shirin.
Hello, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Shirin A Enger, and I'm a physicist that works in medicine. And I'm going to talk to you about one of my research interests. I have many other projects, but due to lack of time, we just concentrate on one of them. So I'm going to talk to you about radiation and how we use radiation to treat cancer. Radiation is used for more than 50% of all cancer treatments, and it's increasing with time because of its non-invasiveness, but also because it's much, much cheaper than chemotherapy. Radiotherapy can be used as monotherapy. It can be used in combination with surgery and chemotherapy. And inside the radiotherapy itself, there are different kind of treatment modalities. So most of you probably know about external beam radiotherapy, where we irradiate the patient from outside in. So we have something called a linear accelerator that rotates around the patients and delivers radiation through beams from outside inside of the patient. I work with brachytherapy, where we insert radiation inside of the patient's body and irradiate from inside out. So instead of irradiating from outside in, I irradiate from inside out. When you irradiate from outside in, obviously you have to go through plenty of healthy tissues to reach the tumor, because sometimes the tumor is placed 10 centimeters below the surface and such. So you have to go through all of that tissue. Obviously, we have techniques how to avoid this and make this less harmful. But in brachytherapy, we try to place catheters inside the patient's body or through a cavity, and insert a radiation source inside the patient's body where the tumor is. We usually try to go inside the tumor or very close to the tumor and treat it. So it's a kind of a very localized tumor that, localized treatment that gives a very, very high dose to the tumor, but at the same time saves organs that are radiosensitive, so organs at risk. Can I put the video? Yes, so it's there. This is just to show you a little bit of workflow, how brachytherapy works. So it's a more precise tumor targeting. As you see, we place the patient on the table. Usually we image the patient with catheters in. So what is the catheter? Catheters are these long tubes that you see. They go from something called an afterloader. This afterloader is a kind of a robot where we have a very high activity radiation source inside it. The radiation source itself is sealed. So it goes, it sits, the red part is the radiation source. It sits on the guide wire, goes through the transfer tube into specific applicator. This patient, for example, is treated for head and neck cancer. So we place an applicator for this specific cancer. The radiation source goes inside, irradiates from different positions. We call this dwell positions, different amount of time. We call them dwell times. And then it goes back. And how long it should stay at each point and how long it should irradiate is done by the mathematical optimization. So the optimization and the dose delivery is done remotely through a computer. So usually patients comes in, we put this applicator, we connect the transfer tubes, and the patient is imaged either with CT or MRI. The radiation oncologist takes take a look at the images and contours where the tumor is, where organs at risk are, and then we do a treatment plan where we use optimizers to plan such that the tumor gets a lot of dose while we save radiosensitive organs at risk. But as you see, for example, in these images, the dose distribution is symmetric. So if you look at the radiation source here, the dose distribution is like a sphere that treats the tumor, but also irradiates nearby healthy tissues. So with brachytherapy, the cure rates are very high, but obviously also since we irradiate healthy tissues, we have also side effects. So the spillage of radiation to nearby sensitive organs, they do cause side effects, and this decreases patients' quality of life. So what I do in my research is I try to insert rotating, so metallic shields inside the brachytherapy needles and catheters, which I connect to rotating panels. And during the treatment, these panels rotate and shield organs at risk. So I have, in this metallic shields, I have emission windows towards the tumor, and then a metal that shields the organs at risk. So we can have a conformal dose distributions that conforms to the shape of the tumor. And this way also we are allowed to, or we can actually escalate the dose to the tumor because we don't have to worry about the organs at risk, nearby organs at risk. So how this is done, let's see. No. How is this? This was another movie that, yeah, here it is. So this is just to show you the, how this treatment intensity modulated brachytherapy works. Pretend that this is a patient with prostate cancer. So this is our prostate phantom. The pink is prostate. The white tube that goes through the prostate is a urethra that is the organ at risk. So we want to treat the entire pink part because that's where the tumor is, but at the same time, save the white part. And then the brown is rectum and the blue is bladder. So we insert the needles as usual, and then we inserted the shields inside. We connect the so we have a template which allows us to place the needles properly. We transfer this connectors to my rotating system, and then we have the commercial afterloader that we connect to my rotating system. And then, so the translation of the source, as usual, it happens by the afterloader. So this robot here, and so we have iridium-192, or another source that I've introduced called ytterbium-169 that comes out. Again, goes and treats the tumor. We place at a different position. It irradiates different amount of time. But with my shields inside the needles, we can actually have anisotropic dose distributions that saves organs at risk. So we can just quickly here, it comes with, can have a look at the dose distribution, how it looks like. So you can see that we actually can shield very well with 0.8 millimeters of platinum in this case. And we have a hexagonal template that allows us to place more degrees of freedom for placing needles. So as you see, and this here, the ytterbium-169 that we've shielded, and we can shield up to 80% on the shielded side. And so this is an very much improvement. We can create a cold spot inside a hot area. For example, here we can actually have a cold area inside the tumor and save the urethra. So urethra is one of the organs at risk that goes through the prostate that gives the patient big side effects if we over-irradiate it. And also if when we over-irradiate rectum, we can rectum bleeding, bladder, obviously urinary problem, and so on and so forth. So with this technique, we can actually save the patient. So so we can cure the cancer and at the same time increase the quality of life of the patient. So this is a very simple engineering that we've done, and we've come up with a very good solution how to help patients. Obviously, we have done lots of scientific computing to be able to deliver dose of radiation transport in human body when you also insert metallic shields and such. So there is lots of computer science, lots of physics, lots of engineering in this project. So this is our publication and how it actually looks like. So we've made this prototype together with a company from Quebec, and you're welcome to email me if you want me to send you the copies of the paper. This is how the dose distribution looks like with unshielded iridium-192 and shielded ytterbium-169, which is a source that I've introduced and then we've shielded. So you can see that anything on the shielded, so any organs at risk on the shielded sides of the needle, they are actually protected. So they don't get 100% of the isodose line that you see in red here. So here is also a treatment planning system that we've made. And this is actually done mostly by undergraduate students in computer science and the computational biology. So we take inpatient CT images, we upload the contours of the patients, we have a drop-down menu for all the commercial radiation sources and source model. We upload that, and then we have an optimizer. Right now it's a mixed integer optimizer. We optimize the dose to the tumor, save healthy organs, And then we get all the dose volume histograms and such that the clinician would like to see. And then later we have those color maps and also those lines so that the oncologist can see how much dose was delivered where. And this is a very complex treatment planning system, actually, that the vendors in the domain of brachytherapy, they don't have it. So we have the most state-of-art treatment planning system right now that is Monte Carlo based, which means that it takes into account the real material and density, so the real tissue components and density of the patient. So it actually transports radiation in the human body and also inside the applicator. So we do assign material and mass density to every component of all the needles, applicators, shields that we introduce, such that the radiation is attenuated properly when it's propagating through the human body, so that those calculations are the most accurate and state-of-art. So here are just some papers for you to have a look at. And I've put this because, again, actually this mixed integer optimization for high-dose rate brachytherapy is written by Majd Antaki, which is an undergraduate student in computer science, and he's the first author in a paper in oncology. So this is great, obviously. Harry Glickman was an undergraduate student when he helped me write this paper, and so on. So many big body of my research is actually done by an undergraduate student. The stoichiometric consideration for ytterbium-169, selenium, and iridium was done by a physics undergrad, Tristan, that is published in that journal, which is one of our most high impact journals, and so on. So we do a lot of interdisciplinary research. We use mathematics, we use physics, we use radiochemistry, we use scientific computing and such to help our students, to help our patients with better treatment and better quality of life. So, and these are my students. Unfortunately, I didn't have my email address, but you can find me, Shirin Enger McGill, and then you'll find me if you Google. So that's it. Do ask if you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Shirin. I'm sure people will have plenty of questions in the breakout rooms about your interesting talk. Our final speaker before we head to the breakout rooms is Jordan Axt from the Department of Psychology. Thank you, Jordan.
All right, so I'm coming to you live from my unair-conditioned apartment. And this day has already provided plenty of sun for those of us in Montreal, so I will finish it up with some science. All right, so I'm a social psychologist, and I'm interested in understanding how social information out in the world can impact our own evaluations and behavior. So I'm going to start with this image that I took when I was traveling in Mexico. Come on, there we go. Okay, so for those of you who don't speak Spanish like me, someone translated this for me because I thought it was humorous. But basically, this is a job ad for a kind of textile store, and it says, we're looking for help wanted, flexible hours, hourly rate, and at the bottom it says you need to be physically attractive. So one of the requirements for this job is that you have to be physically attractive in order to work in the store. So for those of us coming from other places, this is a little eyebrow raising or humorous because we're not used to seeing these types of social qualifications be put so bluntly in job ads. So in the United States and Canada, it'd be literally illegal to have this in a job ad. But just because it's actually illegal doesn't mean there still aren't social and psychological barriers that are at play for people from different social groups when they're being evaluated. And so we can see this becoming a very popular issue. These are just headlines from last year. We could probably pull many more about this idea of, well, what can we do to give people the tools to make sure that these types of biases are not going to be present in their judgment, in their evaluation of other people. And so if someone wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of these programs, it would take a lot of work. They'd be rolling them out across huge organizations. It'd be very hard to track how they're actually doing and what their effectiveness is. So part of my job as a social psychologist is to bring this behavior from the real world and to bring it into a lab context. How can we take this kind of discriminatory behavior, discriminatory judgments, and bring them and produce them in the lab context, and then when we can get them reliably in the lab, we maybe develop ways to reduce their impact. And so that's what I've been focusing on my research the last 3 or 5 years or so. And I've developed this task where you ask participants, tell participants, okay, you're going to be on the hypothetical committee for an academic honor society. You're going to be evaluating some applicants. They're going to be presented with 4 pieces of relevant information. So things like science GPA and humanities GPA. And you need to kind of get an aggregate judgment from those 4 pieces of information and decide whether this person should be accepted or rejected. You're going to see about 60 applicants, let in about half. So you're seeing all these applicants, and some of them are objectively more qualified and some of them are less qualified. So maybe this person is a little bit less qualified than the person you just saw. They should be rejected, and you should be accepting people who are a little bit more qualified. But importantly, there's that big square in the middle of the screen, and we use that square to play with the social information that's available to you. And we can see how does the presence of this social information impact your ability to evaluate who's more versus who's less qualified. And one type of bias that I'm particularly interested in is this bias about physical attractiveness. Now, it makes us a little bit uncomfortable to talk about, and I understand that, but it's very, very impactful for how people are treated throughout their lives. So I think that makes it worthy of study. So when I do this version of the task, some applicants are randomly assigned to be Botticellis, and others are assigned to be Picassos. Now, participants in my studies actually see real human faces that we've pre-rated to vary on physical attractiveness. But I don't like putting up a specific human face to say, look at this more or less physically attractive person. So that's why I have my painting stand-ins for the moment. But my participants actually see real human faces. And so they're doing this across more than 60 decisions. And so this is kind of what it looks like from the bird's eye perspective. You have all these applications that you're seeing. Some of them are less qualified objectively, and they should be rejected. That's what that red outline means. And within that, half are more and half are less physically attractive. Others are objectively more qualified, and they should be accepted. And within that, half are more qualified, half are more physically attractive, and half are less physically attractive. Of course, the participants don't know that. They just know that they have to kind of work through this decision-making context and try and center on those people who they believe should be accepted. And so I can get into how we actually look into this, more details in the analysis and the breakout sessions. But we use something called response criterion. And what it is a threshold. So it's the threshold that you're setting in order for someone to get an acceptance into the academic honor society. So if you have a lower value here, it means you have a lower threshold. You don't need to be as qualified in order to get into the academic honor society. Now, across the entire task, there's actually nothing systematic that differentiates more from less physically attractive people. On average, they're equally qualified. But we can see that the presence of the social information changes how people are treated. This is a nationally representative American sample, I should say. And if you look across all participants, probably to the surprise of no one, if you have a more physically attractive face, it's easier to get into this academic honor society. So what I find interesting about this type of work is that we ask people 2 questions afterwards. The first question we ask them is, did you want to use physical attractiveness while you were making your judgments? A large majority of people say no. 86% of people say no, I didn't want to use physical attractiveness at all. And even they're still showing this bias. They're going easier on people who are more physically attractive. Another question we ask people is, did you use physical attractiveness in your judgment? Again, a large majority of people here, 82% of people say, I didn't use the faces at all. But that's not true when we look at their actual responses. Here, they're still going easier on people who are more physically attractive. So this is a nice example in the laboratory context of what many people might call an implicit bias. Some form of unintended discrimination. People don't know and can't recognize consciously that this more or less physically attractive face is seeping into the way that they look at those things like science GPA and humanities GPA. And what I like about this tool is that you can use it to uncover a lot of different types of biases that people might have. So this is about physical attractiveness. We can also do it for in-group versus out-group. So I ran a version of the study when I was a graduate student at the University of Virginia, that's in the United States. They have a kind of rival school, University of North Carolina, very similarly rated. One is maybe 4th rated, one is maybe 5th rated in terms of public schools, but they're pretty much the same school, okay, in terms of academic rigor. So maybe McGill University of Toronto, for example, here. And we told participants ahead of time, disregard that information. These schools, they're equally rigorous. It's just as hard to get an A at UVA as it is at UNC. So don't use that when you're evaluating people. But among UVA students, again, they can't resist this pull of their in-group. And so they're going to go easier on people from the University of Virginia. And we see this again among people who wanted to be fair or people who thought that they were fair, thought that they weren't using that information at all. So I think it's my job as a social psychologist to kind of take this abstract behavior that we see out in the world and bring it into a lab context through these new methodologies. And then maybe we can start to make progress on what are the interventions or trainings that we can give people to best reduce their impact. So with that, I look forward to having some questions. I also forgot to put my email address here, but you can Google me afterwards and I'm happy to reply to any emails as well. Thank you.